Welcome everyone to the last session of the day, at least for the main part. And today's talk is about notes on the synthesis of time, the art of engineering with AI. And we're happy to have our expert, Sam Aaron, on this topic here. And looking forward to hear and listen to it. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. Hello there. I think that the secret to being an expert is you write your own title and then you become the expert in it. So, I mean, that's just a bit daft. But I want you to start by looking at this scene here, okay? This is, you might think of it as maybe a nightclub. It possibly could be. But really, this person on stage here, she is a professional programmer. And she is programming the music that these people are dancing to. And she's projecting that code on the screen. So this isn't like the Matrix and cool visualizations. You know, a lot of like really cool DJs often will go on stage, crazy visuals, cool lights going on. That usually they're very, very well orchestrated and prepared ahead of time. She's here improvising, modifying the code by literally typing in her keyboard. And as she changes the code and presses the run button, the code modifies and the music changes. Now, I'm putting this here because this is really, I'm trying to talk about changing the social perspective of programming, to try and get people to understand, and maybe you all come to my talks, maybe you're already on the right side of the audience, but understanding that code is not just a tool for business, but it's an incredibly creative force. It's very powerful business, I'm not saying it's not, but also it's such an amazing tool for humanity and for creativity that we're really, as a society, yet to discover the depths of where we can go. And I think illustrations like this, images like this, start to really have an impact and to show. Because I don't know about you, but when I go to parties, which isn't that often anymore, but when I used to go to parties, I used to introduce myself, and they'd say, "Hi, what's your name?" I'd say, "Sam." And they might ask me, like, "What do I do?" And I'll say, "I'm a programmer." And they'll instantly sort of back off, and I won't speak to them again. You know, so now I lie. Now I say, "I'm a musician." And they say, "Cool, what do you play?" And I say, "Code." And I've got them, you know, and I've got them in a conversation. And this is really important, I think, for society to understand that code is not just a tool for business, but it is an amazing instrument. And the tool she's using is one of the tools I'm going to show you. It's called Sonic Pi. And I developed it with an eye in mind of this, but this obviously came much later. I developed it with this in mind. So this is a classroom, one of the first classrooms, actually, the first classroom I developed the software in. That teacher there is Carrie-Anne Philbin. She was an amazing teacher at the time. She's now got an MBE, and she's doing amazing things with research in terms of education and computer science. But we developed Sonic Pi on the Raspberry Pi, which is that really small, cheapy computer that first came out. And I was working at the University of Cambridge at the time, and working on weird music software, working on something else, actually, that I'm not really going to spend time talking about. But I was working on music software, and this computer came out of the labs, and it was selling like hotcakes, but their charitable mission was being struggled to be met, which was to teach kids how to code. That's what, originally, the Raspberry Pi was about, teaching kids how to code. It's now on the stock market, and it's about making products and business. But originally, the goal was to teach kids how to code, and their cool little computer didn't have any kids software which ran on it that actually worked. Because most of the education software for kids was built for the web browsers, built for PCs and schools. It wasn't built for this really affordable, cheap computer. So I took my ideas and I built this live coding system that Sarah was using before, but originally in the classroom for kids and teachers to work with. And that, as an engineering challenge, as a design challenge, as a user interaction challenge, was incredibly difficult. Because you're not only building I had literally 3 months to build a new programming language, to design a scheme of work, to teach it in schools with the teachers, and then to collaborate and teach them, and then to evaluate it. So in 3 months, that's quite a large amount of things. So I had to build the first version of Sonic Pi in about 2 or 3 weeks, and then iterate it very carefully with the teachers. And so you were immediately in the environment where the children were scrambling around, going crazy, and the teacher's got to try and calm them down. And this is the environment that your software has got to be used. And the kids, you can't say to them, "Don't use amplitude 10 million, you know, because it might hurt your ears." Of course they're going to use 20,000 trillion million, right? And so building software in this environment is tricky because you can't say to the users, don't press that button, right? Which you could do if you're designing with a client and you say, okay, this is still a prototype, this bit doesn't work, this bit does work, we're going to focus on this bit. Kids don't listen to that, they're pressing everything. So you've got to get something that works from day one. So it was a really interesting engineering challenge, and I spent the next sort of 12 years developing and iterating over this. I'll show you in a second where that gets to. But this thing is not just a tool for nightclubs. Code is a tool for working with traditional instruments. This is me and a quartet of live coders in the Royal Albert Hall in London, performing with regular traditional instruments, and it was a beautiful combination. And these kids were having a great time performing, pressing buttons, writing their code. They spent, I think it was about 8 months learning to live code, and it led up to this performance. So I just wanted to just try and get your head into the understanding that code can be used in these contexts too, and it's really, really exciting, and can change the way we perceive what programming is. But none of this is new. Nothing's new. Right, we go back to Ada Lovelace, and she's there working with Charles Babbage on the analytic engine and the difference engine. Let's have a picture of one of these. Here it is. And they're working on computers like this. And this kind of computer is quite exciting because it's like a big clockwork thing, isn't it? You know, and you crank the handle round, and it turns the things, and then some numbers pop out the top, and you can use it to do some interesting maths. And the idea here was Charles was wanting to build a tool like this to then use, to then sell to people who could then do their maths faster and more accurately. But Ada, she looked at these things, and she didn't just think, oh, we could make some money selling this to business people. She was like, whoa, this thing is so interesting from both a mathematical, and she was also a poet and a musician, and an abstract language perspective and a musical perspective, that she was able to look at these things and imagine in the future more sophisticated, going in the direction they were already going, systems could make music. And she was thinking that it could make music of your wildest imaginations. So none of this is new. And we can even go further back, and we can look at textiles as a form of programming, and we can look at music as a form of communication. And none of this is new, but it's really interesting to try and figure out how we can make it relevant now. And why make it relevant now? Well, I think that teaching code in schools is really important, even this whole AI thing, and I'll talk about quite a lot in a moment. Not because we want to make more professional programmers. No, it doesn't make any sense to me. We don't teach sports at schools to make more professional sports people. That's one outcome, but most of you have done sports in school, and I don't think many of you are professional athletes. Some of you might be, but most of you aren't. That's not to say you shouldn't have done it. Of course you should. And we should study computer science in schools for similar reasons, because it's really interesting for our brains. It's really interesting to solve problems and deconstruct and analyze, and you get to do stuff like this if we can change the social perspective of programming and understand that this is much more exciting to people than writing. One of the things they saw when I was working was the teachers were scrambling to find good resources to teach code. And so they've asked lots of people, and they came back with, have fun with sorting, as if that's ever going to be fun. And the other one was, give binary a try. Like it's some sort of addictive drug or something. Once you've done some binary arithmetic, you're never going to stop. You know, 2's complement, yeah, I'm going to keep going. So these kind of tools and mechanisms, I don't think are going to engage that next generation, where something like this is and should. And so I've been working on this for many years now, and I'd like to show you what my journey is, how I've come along it. And please feel free to ask questions at any point. I'm really very happy to take questions and to take this into a direction you would like me to go in. But this is the software I built originally in that classroom, the same software that Sarah was using on stage on that picture. And it's really just a glorified text editor where you can write some cool code, and you can press the run button, and it doesn't do anything. Ha! And this is really important. If you ever go into schools and help teach kids how to code, which you really should, it'd be a really, really useful time of your skills. The error state, the teachers and the kids, I think they all the time think this is their fault. It's like, oh, I've done something wrong. That's my fault. And so it's really important straight away to say, actually, for all programmers, unless you're some weird godlike creature, the normal state is it doesn't work. It doesn't ever work until that one moment you're like, yes! And you run around, and then you go, what's the next problem? Oh, it doesn't work again. So that the moments of it working are those fleeting, joyful moments where you're pumping your fists and running around, but most of the time it's like this. And so trying to get that social perspective aligned with reality is really important, because people go really quickly to, I'm terrible, I'm not very good, because I'm making errors. And like, actually, that's totally normal. It's totally normal for it to be an error state. And that clearly is a nonsense thing. And in this system, there's a few words to know, and the word play is the first word to learn, and that makes a beep, and you can make it louder, and you can make it, let's not do 54, 5 seconds long, and you can sort of change the amplitude and change things. And I can spend more time talking about this, but there's other videos, or you can come and find me later, and I'm very happy to give you a demo. But what else can you do? I'm just going to go very quickly. I'm not going to explain this in too much detail. I want to show you this as possible. I also want to promise to you that everything I'm going to show you now, very quickly, I have taught 10-year-old children. So it's important, although it might seem very quick and complicated, possibly, it's no more complicated than Lego. Now, if I showed you a really cool, like, dinosaur I built out of Lego, or some robot mech thing, right? You go, wow, it's complicated. Now actually then smash it and show you the individual bricks. You think, oh, that's not too hard. I can imagine doing that myself. And so these are the individual bricks, but very quickly those bricks make interesting stuff. So I'm going to change the synthesizers like to DSAW or to Profit. That's really good. I like it, like lower number. That's really good with a cutoff value, like 78. Let's go a bit lower. Let's make the release time longer. Now, if you know, well, this number doesn't mean anything. You can just choose high numbers for high notes and low numbers for low notes. But if you know some Western music, you can play, E octave one, if that means anything to you. I'm at a very fast BPM. Let's change it to 60. So I'm able to modify the code and change it. Now, what's nice about this that you probably haven't realized, I mean, how many of you are programmers here? Oh, great, that's good. Did you notice that the sounds overlapped? So we've got concurrency already. And this was a really tricky thing, because in the school curriculum, is concurrency featured? No, it's far too complicated. And that came later in the development, but one of the first things that came was like doing a loop, where you might maybe playing a sample like a bass drum house. I spell it German style, because that's obviously cool. And sleep for half a second, and we have our kick drum, right? That's pretty cool. And then I might want to do another loop, like, I know, sample, let's just keep with the samples, and let's go like bass, something like this. Right, maybe that one goes slower, so I'm going to use a slower time. Right, so now I want to do two at the same time, so create two loops, and I'm going to do sample, bass drum house again, and half a beat. And this is code that I see and when I give a workshop with kids every time. You show them the loop, and every time someone puts their hand up and says, why is this not working? Right, so if you want to learn how to do this kind of stuff, the best way is to read the code with your eyes, try and imagine what it sounds like in your head, then press the run button, be surprised possibly, and then try and then re-understand where did my thinking go wrong, and make some tweaks, do the whole thing again. So look at the code. You heard the bass drum. You heard the bass drum house. How does that sound together? Crap. Where is the bass drop? So this girl, she put her hand up, and she had equivalent code as her samples or her play calls, and she said, basically the equivalent of, why can't I hear the drums and the bass at the same time? And I looked at the code, and it was when we would do this iteration, and we were working on what was going to happen in the next lesson, so I looked at this, you need concurrency. You need two things happening at the same time. And she said, yes, I do. I was like, yes, you do. But the code doesn't work like that. She said, why not? So, well, this code starts at the top, and it works the way down. It's a sequential program language. And this loop, well, loops actually go on forever. So it's like a black hole. It takes the code at the top, keeps it there forever, and we never, ever get down here. And we can show that by swapping them around. You'll hear the other one and not both. And so once she figured out that she couldn't do the drums at the same time as the bass, she immediately switched off. She looked out the window. She wasn't interested. Like, what piece of crappy music software doesn't let me do two things at once? That's just crazy for her. But I went to the teacher and said, hey, can we teach concurrency next week? And the teacher said, sounds great, yeah. Because she was excited with everything we were working on. Is it in the curriculum? I'm like, got like conditionals, we've got lists, we've got data structures, algorithms. Concurrency's not on the list. So I had to go to this girl and say, I'm terribly sorry. I didn't say this, actually, but I wish I did. I'm terribly sorry. If you want to play the drums at the same time as the bass, you're going to have to wait till you're 18. Because if you still want to do it then, you can go to university and they'll teach you concurrency. You know, and it's kind of like, it's sad because if you ever go into a school and you work with kids, you'll realize actually getting them to look at you at all is really hard. Getting them to listen to you at all is impossible. Getting them to look at you and listen to you and follow the instructions is like some miracle that you're going to celebrate. So getting someone to look at you, listen to you, follow the instructions, and then create their own thing. Because we never showed them 2 loops, because obviously you wouldn't do that. But she did this, 2 loops. And so this is a very special place where this person, she had her own ideas and she tried them out herself. It was really a fragile, beautiful moment that I literally came along and just kind of crushed out. She was like a little seed that popped up, and I just stamped her out by saying, no, you can't do it. So I want to say this because as programmers, we can choose where to go here. Do we stick at this? Right, because that's the sensible thing. So if I was working for a good company like TNG, and I had a good client, and I clearly had the objectives of the job there, and the objectives of the job are to teach computer science, I have met those. I have done my job. But that girl, she wasn't interested. From her perspective, I had not done my job. So where do you go? And so as programmers, we get to do cool things. We get to make our own things. We get to imagine stuff like that girl trying to do the loops at the same time. We can imagine, well, what could be a reinterpretation of this that the teachers didn't realize was concurrency, but it was like a loop, but then the kids got to play the drums at the same time as the bass. So very quickly, I invented the live loop. And the live loops, they already sound cooler, and then they need to have names. So this is Kate and this is Sally. And now they play at the same time, right? So when they teach it in schools, we just teach live loops. We don't teach loops. And the teacher thinks it's a bit of a weird name. They've obviously like Python loops or something. But they're like, okay, it's fair enough. I can get around that. But then the kids get what they want. But more. Because live loops, like, can you imagine going to a gig where the performer's like, right, that's pretty cool, but it's getting boring now, right? So I'll just stop it. Right? Maybe I'll make the kick drum louder, and maybe change its low pass filter. Maybe make it a bit louder. And I don't really like that sample. Maybe let's make it double octaves. Right? Every time I'm changing it, I'm doing the normal programming cycle where I'm stopping the code, tearing everything down, modifying the code, bringing everything back up again, and then observing it, testing it. That doesn't work in a live gig, right? In a live gig, you want to be able to comment stuff out and it stop. You want to be able to like turn it off or back up again. Or I might be able to bring this back in, but maybe let's go for like loop, amen, beat stretch 1. Then let's go for 2. And maybe I'm going for like sleep for half, and I'm going to choose onset 0. Pick a random one. Right, I can start to modify the code and get somewhere interesting, all without stopping. Right? And so the live loop gives you this. Right? So I've written academic papers about the timing models behind this. There's really cool mathematics going on behind this. But that's not the cool bit. The cool bit is it works, and it's in a form that a 10-year-old child can use. Now, I did that because that was actually the goal of the project, but I soon learned that by putting myself into really hard constraints, so that was one hard constraint. Everything you need to do has to be understandable by a 10-year-old child. The other hard constraint was everything you need to do has to run on an original Raspberry Pi 1, which is a really, really slow computer. So I had to build the whole thing, compile it, and run it on the Raspberry Pi 1 because I knew that if I got it work on my Mac, then trying to get that thing on the Pi is not going to necessarily be an easy, smooth transition. But getting it running on the hardware it was going to run on would be great. Is there a question at the back? What are the specs of the Raspberry Pi? I think the original one was a single core, like 1,000 megahertz, ARM v5 or something. Yeah, it was, and it was really like bodged together. Like it was like hackled together from old phone chips, Broadcom chips. So it was very low-powered machine. But that really put me on it from an engineering perspective. That gave me a good grounding and allowed me to continue. Okay, so there we are. So you can now see that I can start to play with this. The music you heard me play if you came in early was this. I can take in samples. I can go into nightclub mode. I can get some singing going. So I work with professional samples. And then so all I'm doing here is I have another live loop, and here I'm playing samples I've bought that I have permission to use. And then we can hear the drums coming in. And so you can start to think about making music that isn't just beepy, 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 but is like using samples and styles of artists and music you like. So this is really important. So this is where I was. And I want to talk to you where I am now, because I think the journey has been really interesting. Because if I'm trying to get this into schools, which I have done really well, I have a problem now is that the schools don't want to install a Microsoft installer thing or a Mac app. They just don't want that. They want everything to be on the web. So that's the problem now for getting more schools to use this. The second problem is, this is a traditional programming language which I warped. This is Ruby, which I've sort of treated like clay and malleable, and I've made it into this thing, which is great, works really well, but it comes with all the things that Ruby comes with. And this would be the same if it was Python, it'd be the same if it was Java, or whatever traditional programming language you're going to throw in, which is that programming languages can shell out. They can call the operating system stuff. So I can write a modified program which deletes all the files on my hard drive, trivially. And so this is a problem if we're going to start to build a corpus of kids' code they're going to share with each other and jam together, is suddenly now you've got a security problem where you've got a really horrible attack vector where people can sneak in nefarious code, and then the kids will run it on their machines, and suddenly, boom, bad things happen. So I haven't been able to build a big, nice, cool website where people can upload their code because of this security issue. And schools won't use it anymore because it's an app. So I needed to build a website that was secure. That was like the two things. And so then I had a really good opportunity to work with the University of Sheffield. And they were really interested in what I was doing. And we built this thing called Bleep, me and Guy Brown, who was the head of computer science at the time. And this was like my first idea of how do I take the idea of Sonic Pi into the web. And so it's all using web audio, using Elixir and Phoenix Live View, which are really amazing technologies. The Beam is just an amazing platform for concurrency. And Guy wrote all the synthesizers. And so here's like let's play one of the things. Makes all the sound. So it's the same idea. The code makes the music, but it's all based in a browser. And then we had a really amazing opportunity to work with a fabulous band called the Black Dog, which are a techno band in Sheffield. And they worked with us, and they did new pieces of music, and they took existing pieces of music and translated it to code, and then did a performance with it in an amazing tent as part of the Sheffield University Festival, and also released some of the music they used this system with as an EP, which is amazing, because they made some beautiful sounds that I could just show you and play. And this all works. This language here we're using is called Lua, and I'm using this Lua language, which runs on the Beam. So it's sandboxed, it's secure. You can't put any horrible code in, and it won't run. Doesn't do I/O or disks. And this was where I was. And this was a year and a bit ago. And at this point, I'm like, right, I'm going for it now. I'm going to have to. I couldn't take this any further because this is University of Sheffield's property. Once you sign a contract, it's theirs. But I was going, okay, I'm going to take these ideas, I'm going to meld them in Sonic Pi, I'm going to make myself a website that's like this. And so I started working with Fervor. And this thing here is the first version of this, because This actually is my own browser I built. So I was like, I need to be able to play in a basement in Finland without any internet. So it can't just be Safari or Chrome or whatever. I've got to build my own browser. So I built my own browser and put everything in that. So it's an app you can just download and work with. And then I extracted that further. I was like, okay, I need to build my own, where am I now? Let's go to, oh no. I might have to reset my computer. Let's go to Parallels, yeah. So when you start to think about using agents and AI, I definitely want to use it on like a VM sandbox inside my machine, not my actual machine. And so I built this, so this is Linux running on my machine, and so here I'm going to run like Linux dev tau 5 GUI, and it should start a similar thing. So this is a browser that I've built running on Linux, which then was like going to be the shell framework for this new Sonic Pi. And of course, it's going to have cool visuals, right? That's going to be useful. And it's got an editor, so I can start typing code at the top, and I can split the editor to make multiple things. I can put like cool visuals in them. That's pretty fun. I can start to like modify them. So I was doing this, thinking about what this thing would look like. I've got a shell that I can pop to do the Lua code in, but it didn't have a sound synthesizer. The thing for bleep, Guy had written, but I didn't want to maintain that myself necessarily. He wasn't going to maintain it. The other thing I was using for Sonic Pi was an amazing synthesizer called Super Collider. And this is a 30-year-old piece of software, which is still used in academia for synthesis research. It's just an amazing piece of kit. But it's written in old C++ with multiple threads and everything like this. And so isn't really web-friendly at all, clearly, not at all. But I was like, well, maybe, because I built all my live coding work was using Super Collider as the synthesis engine. So I really understand this thing, know how to make good sounds out of it. So I was like, how do I make this go into the web? And this is the first time I had AI agents. And I was like, last August. And it was Claude 4.4 or something. And I was like, getting some actual results out of this that wasn't, because I was so negative against it. At this point, I was like, oh, it's pretty good. I was like, can I get this working in a browser? Hey, Claude, can you recompile? Because the problem was that this software had been compiled to the web 5 years previously to that, but with a really old process that wasn't going to work particularly well. And so in the web browsers, there's this thing called an audio worklet, which is a really powerful audio process that you can run like high-performance JavaScript in, or WASM, and that will then get the access to the high-priority audio thread. So I was like, can I get this to work in that? So I asked the agent, and 2 hours later, it took me a while, it produced a sound. I was like, this is amazing. And I started for another day later, I'm experimenting with this is great. And then I realized that the AI had decided the job was too hard. But my task was to make a sound with Super Collider. And so he just decided, I can't do that. I'm just going to use normal web audio and make a beep. So it had masqueraded, it had totally lied, and in a way that was so realistic and so believable. And that was a fundamental changing point to me that I'm sure you all have a similar kind of idea about, which is AIs gaslight you all the time. And if you don't think they're going to gaslight you, then you're going to get into trouble pretty quick. If you assume they're going to gaslight you at all times, I think that puts you in a much more powerful stance to tackle them. At which point then, you think, well, how am I going to work with something which is always lying to me? And actually, and people sell these AIs as like this thing which is like an orator of knowledge. You ask it a question, it gives you the answer. But that doesn't fit well with it's a gaslighter. Right? Sometimes it gives you answers which are right, sometimes it doesn't give you answers that are right at all, and you don't know really easily the two difference. And the problem is that the negative answers have the form of correct answers. So one of my friends who's a researcher in law in Australia, he has this real problem now where law used to, if it had the full legal structure of law, it was most likely written by a proper legal person and probably had some kind of backing. But now, anyone can write something which has the structure of law, but doesn't necessarily have the actual contents. It's not meaningful, but looks the part. AIs can do that really well. And so if you've got a thing which is gaslighting you can't trust, you can't assume it's the orator of knowledge. But I found that you can actually use these together in a really powerful way, because you can use it to throw it at problems and then see what sticks. And you don't get the answers back from it, you get more information. And then you can use your brain to then pick that apart and figure out what the right thing is to do. So you don't ask it the question, you ask it to build things, and you ask questions assuming it's going to lie to you all the time, and then you can construct the truth from that dialogue. Does that make sense? So rather than you asking the questions, getting the answers, you're just kind of like misleading it as much as it's misleading you, and by doing that, you can get it to shine a light on things that you couldn't see before. And so I then learned that. So I managed to get this to working, and I managed to sonicpi.net/supersonic. And I built this. Obviously, it looks similar. This is running on a web browser, and I can boot the demo. And yeah, it's all. So this is SuperCollider running in the browser. Now, I want to show you this because I've not actually had no idea how long I've got left in my time. But this is how I developed it. This is really important because this demo I'm showing you here is fun to show you now, but it was a critical part of the development process. Because I didn't know what the hell I was doing, I didn't know any WASM, I didn't really know much JavaScript, I didn't know audio worklets, I didn't really know the internals of SuperCollider. Didn't know any of that stuff. I mean, I'm pretty good at programming, but any programmer, you put them in a new domain, and they're like, okay, what do I need to do? And so I quickly built telemetry, right? So I could see what's happening. And like, oh, that should be a 7, but it's a 9. Why is that a 7? What's going on with this? I got logs everywhere, so I could see what's happening. So in order to use this idea of it's gaslighting you and you can't trust it, you've got to get it to project to you information you can start to learn to trust. You've got to build programs inside of it that you can trust. And then you can get it to use those programs, and that will filter the trust through that. I've got these diagrams here are showing the structures of the memory model. And I can observe that to say, well, actually, that shouldn't be connected to this. It should be connected to this. Why has that gone wrong? And so through the telemetry, through the logging, and through and luckily also, because I understand SuperCollider, I know how it sounds. So when I got it to run something and it didn't sound correct, I was able to go, well, that's not right. That's like a knowledge of the domain, which was really useful. This then turned out to be a really powerful thing to do, because once I'd figured this out, this is now Christmas, just 6 months ago, 5 months ago. I was like, okay, now I understand SuperCollider inside out. Now I understand web audio. Now I understand building C++ stuff in a browser using WebAssembly. Now I understand about shared array buffers. Now I understand about... I'd learned so much through this process. So this is the other thing, is if you're using AIs and you're not learning anything, you're probably going to lose badly, because like you just don't know what it's doing. Whereas if whilst you're building a thing, you're constantly learning from it, then that actually gets you in interesting places. Because I think one of the advantages of AIs is that they have this amazing tool for pattern matching, right? But they pattern match with flair, right? They find things which are similar, and then they mutate it a bit. And that mutation can be a good one, or it can be a terrible one, and you never know. And so that's flair is the always thing you've got to watch out for. But the pattern matching goes across all domains. So it's amazing. So you can use your skills in your domain to ask questions about another domain, and then, because there's tons of science that hasn't been done yet, clearly, because scientists work in there, I'm a physicist, I'm a chemist, I'm an astrophysicist, I'm not a physicist. Like, okay, fine. And so they spend all their lives on that one track, which is great, but you don't get cross-track work done very much at all. And when I was in university, there's always people talking about, look, we need to do more interdisciplinary work, but it never really happened that much because the rewards weren't there. AIs, I think, can cross those lines so frictionlessly, we can start to board across them. So how long have I got left, by the way? 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Do you know? 15. Perfect, right. Okay. So this is Christmas. I've got the Supersonic working. I didn't know it was going to be possible. This was a project I didn't know I could do. So in like October, I was in a state, talk about AI psychosis. I'm like, Am I going completely crazy trying to build something that's not even possible? And I'm believing it. Like, it was a really weird place. And it is a weird place to think about building things you can't imagine building before. But then suddenly, it exists. And like, well, it must work. But like, well, how does it work? Like, that surprise was really interesting. But through all of the knowledge I gained, I was able to ask new questions. Like, so I'd already had in my head, I now was going to plug this in to Tau 5, this thing I've built here. And actually now if I show you the sound system, you can see Supersonic is in there. I'm gonna hook it all together now. I'm gonna use my language skills. I'm gonna program a thing, make it. I've got the sound engine. This is the future. And so this is where I thought I was going to go from. And but it isn't, because once I built Supersonic, I learned something magical. I learned really about the power of this kind of style of programming. Clockwork programming, I call it. Because when you work in an audio thread, you can't do any memory allocations, you can't do any I/O, you can't do anything that essentially blocks stuff, because it's got to keep pumping the data through to the speakers. And so that pumping has to go on a regular tick. And that regular tick is not the system clock of your computer, because that's crappy and drifts everywhere. The audio hardware has its own really good clock, and it sends every audio, whatever frequency you're running at, so say you're running at 48 kilohertz and you've got a sample size of 128 bits, then every 2.67 milliseconds, it's asking for the next bit of data, regularly. And so it's a bit like having the audio hardware, turning that knob there very fast, but very precisely, and the machinery is working around in that. And this is a really good example, because we're not adding new machinery, we're not changing the machinery, there's no memory allocations, because what is a memory allocation? It's more metal. Right? It doesn't work that way. You build it all ahead of time, you create the memory layout, and then you work within that space, and you can do really good jobs. And so I learned that with the Supersonic, that I had to build a machine like this. That's what Super Collider is. But once I'd learned this shape, and this is like the critical thing from the talk really, is that I learned this shape through the conversations with the AI. I was then thinking, well, maybe I could build a programming language which has this shape. That would be pretty cool, because then I wouldn't have to have another programming language talking to another programming language. I could have all in one go, and I get crazy good timing, because this is working on the audio clock. And it would then all work on embedded and lower things. And so I then I haven't touched this thing at all since then. I started working on a whole new programming language. I built a virtual machine with bytecode and trees. And I can go into detail later if you want to talk about it. But essentially, I came up with, where are we? Here. This. So this looks like Sonic Pi. And to all intents and purposes it is, but it's a web browser, and it's running this language which looks exactly like the Ruby language which I built, but it's completely separate. I'm using Rust to implement it, using TreeSitter to do the syntax stuff, and it's using the Supersonic in the background, and it makes some cool sounds. So this is all running inside, and you can't really see it. So let's go to preferences. Let's go to like high contrast mode, icons, color. Where have I put the color thing? Samuel, where? Can anyone see where the high contrast mode is? There we go. I can see that better. Yeah, so this is all running in the browser now, and I'm able to run this with the Sonic Pi, I'd run all the code 500 milliseconds ahead of time, because the code had to deal with the fact that the computer could go to sleep and do stuff and slosh about. And so I would have to run the code and also it was running on the Raspberry Pi 1. So I had to run the code 500 milliseconds ahead of time and send the messages to Super Collider with timestamps. And then Super Collider was really good at doing the thing on the right time, because it was a clockwork language, because it used the audio clock to be able to know what the exact time was, to know I'm going to do this thing. And so this was exciting to me. This programming language here, I was asking one of my professor friends at Cambridge, I was saying, like, how low do you think I've got it, right, from 500? What do you think I've got it? He went, 50? I was like, no, lower. Lower? 25? Lower. Lower? 5? Lower. Lower? 1. Lower? Yes, 0. So this code can send and communicate with the synthesizer with no latency. Now that sounds crazy, it sounds physically impossible, because if I've got a machine here or a program here and I'm talking to another program here, physics say there has to be some time. How is that possible? Well, this is not a normal programming language. It's not a normal programming environment. This is a clockwork language. This runs in the audio thread alongside the synthesizer. So if you think about the audio thread as a circle, and it's spinning around 2.67 milliseconds every iteration, you start doing some audio processing, and then when you've done all the audio processing, you've given the audio to the speakers, you wait for the next cycle, and you start again. If you do too much in your circle, then you run out of time and the audio breaks. So if you're ever using audio software on an old computer that starts crackling, this is what's happening. So in order to make music, in order to generate speakers with the data, you have to feed it fast enough and clearly enough. Now, if you've done half of that cycle and then with your computation for the audio, and then you're waiting for the next cycle, well, you could do other stuff there. And if the other stuff is in the same memory space, then they could talk to each other by putting stuff into memory. So I can run my programming language in the first half of that cycle tick. It can then put all the instructions of what to do in a piece of memory, and then the synthesizer can wake up and then pick those instructions up and execute them as if they'd been sent by another program 500 milliseconds before, but they're just there, they're ready, and we go round and round and round. So this is amazing, exciting to me, because I built, not only have I didn't want to build my own synthesizer, it was never a goal, but I built my own synthesizer, and the timing is exquisite. And this is going to be an exciting platform for the development of live coding systems for me for the next 10 years of my life. I'm really excited to be able to see where I can build this. But the critical thing I want to talk to you about is the fact that the AIs, even though they're gaslighting, even though you can't trust them, they have been incredibly powerful when I have worked with them knowing that. And the conversations I've had with them have been about me learning and me gaining knowledge and insights, and then using that insight. So think about, like, the way I work with it, is I will initially generate lots of prototypes about the idea I'm trying to build, and then not care about the quality. Vibe code them, if you want to use the terminology. Just vibe code the stuff, see what happens, then delete it all. Right? Because once you've got the knowledge, once you've lived in the experience that you're creating, you can go, that was rubbish, or that's really cool, but I don't like that bit, but I like that bit, so I'm going to remember those things. And then you, in your head, build the architecture. And then, once you've got the architecture understood, then you can then build it yourself. You can build it by hand, or you can use LLMs. I'll use LLMs still, but I'll go into a very slow process where I'm doing it bit by bit, carefully checking, carefully testing, looking at it. So 2 different modes: experimental creative mode, which I delete, and then a very careful engineering mode, where I'm being meticulous and I'm building something that I want to be able to work with and that will last. Yeah, does that make any sense? I don't know if that's interesting to you, because I don't know, like, you all work in large projects, right, with big corporate entities, and I'm a weird artist person that has complete free time to do what I want. So I have no idea if my experience is relevant to you or not. But I think there's a good chance it might be, because I've been able to do things perhaps that you might not have done, because I get to choose exactly what I do and when I do it. So I can literally spend 2 months, which I did, on a project I didn't even know was going to work, and I can see what happens out of that and see what learning I get from that. So maybe some of this is interesting to you or not. So any questions at this point? Got 5 minutes left. Yes?
Do we need the mic?
I can repeat the question.
Is it working? Yeah. Oh, I have so many questions. Thank you for this.
Well, we can talk later. Fine.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. How many browsers have you built now?
How many browsers? So the building a browser, I mean, I say that like a throwaway thing. It was just building it with, there's 2 approaches I've used so far. One is using Qt, and I use the WebKit, the Chrome engine thing, and then you build all the stuff around it. And then more recently I've been using Towery, which is a Rust framework, which doesn't include the browser, but uses the systems browser. So you end up with a much smaller binary, and you don't have to maintain the browser. Because the problem with the browser, as soon as you've got security things, you've got to keep pushing the updates. Whereas if you're using the systems browser, then you don't have to worry about that at all. You're just building the framework. But yeah, the browser part really was about making sure that you didn't need the web. Because I have done gigs in bunkers in Finland where there wasn't any Wi-Fi. So it's a critical part. Yep. More questions?
I can keep talking, man. How is your WebAssembly experience then? I mean, did you struggle with it?
I really struggled with WebAssembly, yes. The first thing I couldn't do is there's no print statements. Certainly in the, so I'm not just using, I don't know how much you know about JavaScript at all, but I didn't know much at all. I knew about JavaScript. You had a main JavaScript thing. You can now have workers, which are separate threads. And then you can have worklets, which are special kind of workers. And the audio worklet is a special kind of worklet. And this is the one that has this high priority audio thread. And because it's got no mallocs and no I/O, there's no print statements. So the first thing I had to build was a sort of echo print statement using the ring buffers to actually get the thing to tell me it was alive before I could even start debugging it and figuring it out. So like having to bootstrap from the ground up, even just like debugging was a nightmare. And that was actually a critical thing, is like, I talked about the experimental parts of like vibe coding ideas. What you had to do, what I had to do is try all this and then figure out what is the part, where is the next step that I know I can test in a clear and simple way. So having an echo server where I send it a message and I get the same message back, I send a different message, get the different message back, I can really easily validate that. And so that's like, if I can get to that point where I can validate it, then I know I'm in a safe place. I can breathe, and I can figure out where to go next. So it's kind of building these stepping stones by experimenting the ideas and then figuring out the path was a really critical thing. And yeah, I need to do that for WebAssembly. Any more last question? Yes, hello?
You said this is going to interest you for the next 10 years.
Yes.
Could you give us a glimpse of the next 10 years, what you're most curious and interested about?
So I am really interested in trying to find ways to get schools to engage in this more, but I'm also interested in society to engage in this more. I think that lowering the barrier to entry is a critical thing. So I already did that with Sonic Pi by making it simple, by making it easy to install, building a full tutorial and having the tutorial translated to many languages. But the browser is clearly another thing I can do to lower that friction. But also on top of that, I'm really excited by the idea of people jamming together. And so the Bleep thing I built had that in mind. It runs on the server, everyone connects to each other, everyone who jams together all plays in the same time by default. So the next phase is to get this hooked up to a pub subsystem on the web where we can start to send the events back and forth and people can start to jam together. And I want to get kids in Africa jamming with kids in Finland. And that would be a really exciting thing to start to think about how we can collaborate and jam together using these kind of software that makes programming fun and engaging and creative and meaningful to people so that when you go to parties and you say you're a programmer, you have a good conversation. Thank you very much.